All right, we're live and ready, Mr. Mayor.
All right, sounds good. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's a meeting of the Seldovia City Council, Monday, April 15th, 2024. Time is 4:03 p.m. and this will be a work session. A couple of items for discussion today: the FY25 budget, general fund overview, and then followed up by a business incentive discussion. So we'll go ahead and start it off. Let staff kick it off with the FY25 budget general fund overview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will start by sharing my screen and just say that both conversations kind of rolled into one, but if you guys want to separate them out later, you can. I just did the one presentation because they all kind of blend together. So if you've got the screen here, this FY25 general fund draft budget, a couple of exciting things that I'll note later on in the budget. We did receive back our FY23 audited actuals, and that'll be discussed at tonight's regular meeting, but I was able to quickly incorporate those numbers into the draft budget for today's discussion. And it does show the general fund being out of the deficit and in the black, along with the harbor. So that is exciting. With that, just a quick agenda. We'll go over the 5-year revenues versus expenses for general fund, the general fund revenue, general fund expense overview, and then some considerations of those expenditures per fund, as well as talk about the general fund assigned funds and future considerations for community and business support, and then a reminder for upcoming discussions. I just like to share this document to start off with a discussion to keep in mind. It was hard when I started at the city, not being familiar with local government practices or local government budgets in the beginning, that realization that all of the revenue goes into the general fund and it's not split out by department. So property tax, sales tax, other revenues, they go, as you see in this top of the pot, or the top 3 go into the big pot of the general fund, and then that is broken out into expenses. So it's run a little differently than the special revenue fund or a business enterprise fund, which would have more of an in and out. Instead, everything runs into the general fund and then is allocated out to the different departments. If we look at a 5-year overall overview of expenses versus revenues, you can see, even though we know historically that we were in a deficit, or a deficit had been actualized as of 8-10 plus years ago, realistically, the council and the city has made steady gains for at least the last 6 or 7 years. I think even longer than that, really. And I can provide a longer history if you want, but at least we're noting the last 7 or 8 years that we have been making up that difference, and our revenues are meeting our expenditures, which is a really good thing. FY23, I wanted to note with the actuals, it is high both expenses and revenue wise, due to the fact that it includes a 2% sales tax, a one-time proceeds for a greater finance agreement, and the greater lease payment. If you haven't looked at those, if you haven't looked at that audit report later, or if you haven't looked at the audit report yet, later on, we'll have the auditors on during the regular meeting and they can go over that a little bit more. But essentially, the entirety of the asset for the entirety of the grader was included as an asset, and so that really increased that expense. But then it was also offset as proceeds for the greater finance agreement. So they're both ballooned up because of that greater. But even still with that, you can see that our revenues exceeded our expenses, and we are actualizing a little bit in the black. FY24, we don't see as much of a difference. And I wanted to point that out was because we did include 55,000 in SPD other category for police services. And again, we always budget high for expenses, lower for revenues. So you don't see as much of a difference. I did not do that. I did not include as of yet. I'll leave it up to council and your recommendation that 55 or 85 or whatever amount, if you want in reserve for the SPD, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I did not include that in FY25 as of yet. Also per the FY23 audited actuals, and as I said earlier, and a couple of times, those funds are both in the black. So that's stated on that presentation. Okay, now we start getting into the nitty gritty, and please stop me if you have any questions. And this is just an overview of the revenues for the general fund. Again, one big pot of money. You can see FY 21, 22, and 23 audited actuals, FY 24 budget, and FY 25 proposed. It changes to the FY 25 general fund revenue include a 2% decrease in the real property tax per KPB preliminary assessment figures. Public safety assistance has been removed along with other intergovernmental revenue we are no longer actualizing. So without a chief of police, we knew that we would no longer see those public safety funds. We didn't see them in FY 24, and we're not anticipating to see them in FY 25. We do have an increase in facility rents with the kiosk rentals and an SFL rental rate increase that went into effect as of January 1. And those facility rents include SFL, Sispree, Seldovia Space, and Gateway kiosks. Our investment income, if you note on towards the bottom of the page, we had budgeted 4,500 for last year. We actualized 10,370 for FY23. We are budgeting 10,000 for FY25, and that is our interest for the AMLIP account. So the MMRF are now our permanent fund, the small portion that's sitting in there. It's nice to see this increase because if you look back at FY21 and FY22, they were not so great. It was 1,500 for FY21, 176 for FY22. FY23, we saw that it started making a little more interest. FY24, we budgeted low, but we're seeing those numbers remain consistent. So we did project a $10,000 budget for FY25. Of course, we know that depends on the bonds and the market, so that could change. So that's just something to note there. SOC is also, I wanted to know it's as a pass-through account. There is an increase for SOC just below that investment income. That's due to source of recommendations for employee wages increase. And while we keep it separately in the budget, it will show on the revenues for the audit like this, but for the budget purposes, and I'll talk about this again here in a little bit, or for the audit purposes, the SOC wages are included under administration in the general fund. Lease interest income is new to the budget per FY22 audit and newer GASB requirements. So that's at 21,590 and 21,432. And I'm sure our auditors can talk more about that if you have any questions. But overall, just to start for revenues, any questions? There's not a lot of significant changes other than what was pointed out here. No? Okay. So then we'll get more into expenditures. So FY25 general fund expense overview. Like I mentioned before, the FY23 actuals includes the greater finance agreement in Public Works, which is why that's highlighted in yellow in the middle of the page. And it does account for it in the audit that we overspent for Public Works because that wasn't accounted for. So it went from a 300 and something $1,000 budget or expense to a 554,423 expense just because of that grader. But from the way I understand it, and she'll talk more about it, that puts the grader into our funds as an asset. And then moving forward in the future years, we won't see that significant difference play out, and those the asset will balance out with the future expenses for the grader. FY24 expenses, as I said, it included 85,000, and then for the police services and under other, and then through a recent council appropriations for the new refuse truck, that was decreased to 55,000. So I have that highlighted that we budgeted 101, but without spending that 55,000, it's not going to be nearly as high. Let's see, for FY25, currently it's budgeted at $22,412, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But that's something for council to consider, is how you want to see that moving forward. If you want funds set aside, in case we need to stand up the department, or if there's another direction you want to go with it. But at this moment, it's just sitting with basic expenses in that account or in that department. FY25 general fund expenditures includes an overall 10% increase for health insurance and general liability insurance. Previously, when we talked, we thought it was going to be 4% for health insurance. We did finally receive those numbers back last week, and it was full 10%. We are going to go out. We have to fill out some employee consent forms this week and go out and see if there's any better options. But per our insurance broker, it's sitting about the same with everybody right now. So we'll see if we can get a little bit better of a deal, but for now it's budgeted at 10% and then a 1.7% CPI increase. And I'm sorry, it cut off. My next note was just saying that individual department changes were coming up in the discussion. We'll start here with the administration considerations for FY25. And this is just going through each department and what those changes were or are so far included in the budget. So under administration, FY25 includes an employee appreciation account and marketing account. This is not something we've had in the budget before, but we've had expenses that have gone towards both of these items or these types of accounts. And we go around and around it every year. Like, well, does it go under supplies? Where, can we put out, where does this fit best? So with that in mind, and for your guys' consideration, we were recommending to put just an actual employee appreciation account and in a marketing account to allow to establish, that process to continue. We normally do like an employee appreciation party in the winter. And then last year through the SMOLT education grant, we were able to purchase marketing materials and stickers and brochures for the SMOLT education. And if that's something, and we can talk, well, that'll come up also in the business incentive discussion, if that's something that council wants to see us continue in the future as needed, if we want to order pens or stickers or I don't know, bags with a logo on it or something moving forward, having that account established can allow us to have a little bit of freedom and flexibility to order items up to a budgeted amount in order to help promote the city. Travel increase. This is a big one. You're going to see it in both council and in administration, and certainly please provide your feedback on all of this. We did increase travel and training in order for under administration. Finance Officer Yeager requested this year to be able to attend the AML local conference for the local finance association. She wasn't able to attend previously, though this is something we have offered previous finance officers. And in seeing last year's, they come out really late with their agenda, but in seeing last year's, it sounded like there were some things that she thought could be really beneficial. And we would like to be able to encourage her to be able to go. So there is an increase for that, as well as a little bit in there to support the city manager going to the AML Summer Conference in Kodiak in August. Of course, these are not necessities, but we know how beneficial they can be for the city. And in the council, when we get to the next page, there's an even more significant increase in travel and training to allow for council members to be able to attend some of these various events. So definitely give that your guys' consideration on what is acceptable or not for that. It does stand in the budget that it can cover it, but also realizing that that is slowly kind of eating into that public safety nest egg. So weighing out those balances, would be happy to have your feedback. Office supplies is increased. Just we're seeing that with inflation across the board. Equipment was increased. Radzi put together a fantastic kind of a computer equipment replacement schedule. It puts us on a 4-year schedule. Of course, if we don't need to replace something, we're not going to just go out because it's been 4 years, but that really seems to kind of be the cycle for council computers, staff computers. I mean, even the monitors and this council chambers are included. And so it just between administration and council, that equipment budget line gives us a pretty good figure for being able to upkeep with being able to replace that equipment as needed. Freight postage, repairs and maintenance remain minimal, but and that doesn't read correctly. I'm sorry. They remain minimal, but it does. But a small amount is budgeted in case of emergencies. They all just sit with the same amount pretty much year to year, and sometimes we end up utilizing a small amount of it, but generally not so much. As stated, insurance and health insurance is a 10% increase. The audit, as we mentioned at the previous work session, is recommended that it be split between admin, council, public works, and special revenue funds based on a fund revenue allocation method. I didn't include it in this packet. It was in the last one, and I can pull it up if you guys need that reminder. But what it looks at is that the general fund revenue as a whole is over 50% out of all of the revenue accounts. And that includes the special revenues, water, sewer, boat haul out, harbor, and dock. And then it allocates those funds out, those expenses out based on the revenue fund size. So we'll see admin, council, and public works have a little bit more of a hit for the audit. And then it decreases that allocation for the audit on that burden on those smaller funds. Water stays about the same. Harbor stays about the same, but the rest of the funds see a little bit of a decrease for the audit. Dues and fees were increased from 3,500 to 6,339. This is just a shift based on that fund revenue allocation method and usage of software. It's still in the general fund. It's shifting from the multi-purpose building and some of the other funds into admin due to Jan and myself's just overview of who utilizes that software. We're talking, and a big part of it's going to go to council, which will be on the next page. Our Zoom account. Before, council wasn't realizing any of the Zoom. It was just going into the multipurpose building. And across some of the other funds, and our archive social for Facebook. Those are the two big ones. And so this just brings the burden back more into align with admin and council. Travel and audit are the largest increases to the fund. And as I said before, additionally, SOC is included per the audit, but is listed separately in the budget so that we can account for it better. Any questions on administration to start off with? Okay. So our next department is council. And like I said, there it does see a travel increase and a training increase. Again, not necessities, but attending last year's AML local government conference and seeing the amount of networking and knowledge that was presented and available, I would really recommend that at least a council member or two can attend if they can and if there's budget for it. I think it was really valuable. I know Councilmember Langbart was able to attend the conference in Juneau this last January, February time. I'm not recommending that we attend next year's winter conference in Juneau. I think that needs to be on a case by case basis, depending on what kind of needs we have. It does have benefit, and for one, and I'll mention this briefly in the city manager's report later on this meeting. We did see and we did receive from Senator Stevens' office that the Senate's capital bill went to the House, and in it is included some appropriation for the raw water transmission line right now. We don't know if it's going to stay, what's going to happen through the House, but we do know that the House is situated to add an additional, what was $100 million?
Yeah, 100 million.
100 million. So potentially it might sit in there and then, depending on the governor veto. But those are the kinds of things that we can see and actualize out of having these opportunities to just shake a hand, network, say hi, and go attend these events. But I do realize that it is a steep increase to the budget. So this training and travel increase includes mayoral travel to the AML Summer Conference in Kodiak, partial allocation for staff travel to AML Local Government Conference, allocation for 2 council members to that local government conference, and a partial allocation for the city clerk professional development in June 2025. That is always dependent on her receiving scholarships, or that position receiving scholarships. City Clerk Diamond did receive one for this June. There'll be a little bit of a cost to the city because it doesn't cover all of it, but it does cover the majority of it, and is an amazing opportunity for her to be able to bring back some pretty great educational knowledge on everything from minutes to elections, and everything in between. So any thoughts on travel or training?
I just one comment for me. Yeah, I mean, I personally don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think it makes sense for the opportunity to be there if council members can participate in that, as well as the other options for staff too. I mean, that it's a cost. Training is always a cost, but the cost benefit should hopefully counteract or be relevant to cover those costs and make sure hopefully in the end either the staff or council is getting something out of it. I mean, we're not always going to gain something monetarily, but at least understanding well into the future of how government works, who the contacts are, when and where we need to participate. That all makes sense to have a little bit of money set aside to provide that opportunity.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think the networking that is possible is a great asset for the city. If I can ask, the monies, if I was clear what you said, the additional funds that we're looking at are coming from the SPD funds, is that right?
Yes and no. I mean, the SPD has decreased significantly, and there isn't anything allocated for an other fund or a position fund. So that does give the council a little bit more leeway in budget, because the revenues are still exceeding expenditures.
Okay, Yeah, I think it's a worthy cause for our staff and for any council members who would like to travel with an agenda and information. I think we're pretty cognizant of what it takes to travel out of Seldovia and the expense, and so I'm in favor of it. It's a good consideration. Thank you.
Okay, if there isn't anything else on that, and let me know if anything comes up in the future, we will carry through. Office supplies again increased for just general inflation and costs that we're actualizing. Telephone and internet is increased from 0 to 2,700, and that's just, as said before, a shift from the MPB, so still in the general fund, but shifting it to just show what the internet and phone costs are for council usage in this chamber. Freight, postage, repairs, and maintenance remain minimal, but again, we still budget a small amount in case of emergencies or anything comes up. Equipment remains the same, and it does include that those computer updates as scheduled or as needed, but there is a schedule to kind of account to help us project what those needs are going to be. And then utilities are not budgeted to council. They are budgeted to the multipurpose building. Audit was split between admin, council, and public works and special revenue funds. Legal remains steady. Insurance and health insurance, as said before, 10% increase. Dues and fees, similar to admin, are increased for software fees based upon that fund revenue allocation method. And for council, really, that is that the Zoom account and the archive social. Travel and training are the largest increase to the fund. Everything else is fairly steady. Okay, so public safety. Here's a little bit bigger of a discussion. So our public safety accounts really are fire, EMS, and the Seldovia Police Department. If we start with our fire and EMS, they remain fairly status quo. There was an increase to the ambulance under EMS from 500 to 1,500, and that accounts for the fact that they need new chains this year for our public works department. Telephone and internet increase. The fire and EMS and telephone and internet were previously allocated to MPB, and we just shifted a little bit more to show that actualization of what it costs each account for their, or each department for their telephone and internet. The membership incentive program funds and training funds remain the same, even though they have not been fully actualized yet for FY24. I think it's their new opportunity. And in the last, we've talked about it, or it's come up in the last couple of department meetings. And in the last department meeting, they actually moved to use a portion of the training funds for a recent training opportunity for a member of the department. And I think they're working towards some of those membership incentive program utilization of the membership incentive program funds. So if that's something that council wants to continue to offer, I do feel like they will start to use it more. They may not use all of it for FY24, but being able to build those systems in and realize that those funds are available and how to use them, I think that they're headed in the right direction. So again, that was 6,000 for fire and 6,000 for EMS. That's included in the budget per FY24 and is just carrying over into FY25. The SPD continues to include a $12,000 living stipend for the VPSO program. Equipment increases from 2,500 to 6,500. And that is really the fuel, maintenance, and new tires for the police truck. So they are pretty active in using that truck, and we are seeing a little bit more for fuel than we have previously. But it's the 6,500, I feel like will cover all of the needs of that truck. If you haven't seen it recently, I should have included pictures. They put new decals on it and it looks really great. Telephone, internet increases from 0 to 2,600. And again, it was previously allocated to MPB, so we're just shifting it back, especially because at the end of last year, or of FY23, we did have the VPSO program come back and ask us for the expenses that the city had spent on the program, and they were able to reimburse us for them. And so this again just shows that actualization of what the telephone and internet costs for that department, and freight, which we didn't previously include. I did put $100 in there because we have seen some small freight for tools or equipment as needed, but not a lot. And then for tires, potentially, depending on how we order those, there could be some freight for that. So that really leaves the question with, does council want to continue setting aside funds in SPD in the event the department needs to be restood up? Would you like to explore other avenues to reserve funds for a position if needed? And in FY24, as mentioned, 85,000 was included in the budget. 30,000 was reallocated for a new refuse truck, but at the end of FY24, there's still 55,000 in that fund that is budgeted for use should it be needed. Another option is to assign funds to a reserve account in the event the position needs to be rehired. That's kind of a tricky one, and we're going to talk about our reserved and assigned funds here in a minute. Or I wanted to put it out there with our current trends. If they continue, it is possible that in the future, in the event that that needed to happen, maybe not this year, but in the next year or the year after, we could do some shifting around and utilize some of those unassigned funds, which would be the ending fund balance, to stand that department up if we need to. I mean, you guys are headed in a decent direction, and as long as that continues, that might be available. So I don't know if you have a preference for this year.
Right now, you have the 22,412 proposed budget for FY25. That basically covers everything right here with nothing left over, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's the stipend. That's the truck, which is under equipment, telephone and internet, freight. Let's see, I can actually pull that up.
Yeah, I think it's pretty it's pretty self-explanatory right there, just over in your, the 12, the 65, the 2,600, and the 100. So that comes within pretty close to that 22,412 over there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to, if anyone else has got any thoughts, comments on that. I know originally when we first stood up the VPSO program, there was, we were unsure about a number of things. Obviously we're already second year into this.
No, I think we're still in our first.
Are we in our
Jared
first year
came
still?
online in May, and Amy came online in July.
Okay, so we're right at the end of our first year then, basically. Okay. We're solid. I know we get reallocated every year, correct?
Through the state, yes.
Yeah. So has that process already happened for FY25, or is that all still dependent on what they pass now down in Juneau?
I believe it's still dependent on what they pass, but there isn't any indicators that that things will change. But I'll double check with Mike and just see if he has any more information at this time.
Okay. And then I guess this goes back to kind of Vivian's question too, about just, so if we did go forward with the 22,412, by de facto, I mean, if we had 100 last year and we're 22 this year, the other 80 grand it's rolling back into it's going somewhere. It's going to either go to a reserve fund, or it's going to get spent on something else. Correct?
Correct. So it would be, and this is, I can just jump ahead real quick because this will maybe help with this discussion. So we started this discussion a few work sessions ago, and it will come up in the audit this evening as well. Council does have a few assigned funds through the general fund, the major maintenance and repair fund. I'm recommending that we put a little bit in there for SFL, capital improvements in the future. That rental building that's on the corner of Dock and Main Street, that's what I'm talking about. Assigned funds for the 2% sales tax, the Seldovia permanent fund that's in AMLIP, and then we also have this Lake Susan and vehicle replacement fund. So those are all either incorporated into the general fund ending balance, or according to the audit, they are payable to the general fund. For instance, AMLIP isn't in the ending fund balance right now. However, if we were going to use any of those funds, that they would be payable to the general fund, and that's where they would come from. So when we look at reserves or assigned funds, if you have an instance where your revenues are exceeding your expenditure, they're going to roll into this ending fund balance, which is the top line you see there. And then right now in the audit, they are put into what is they're calling as capital overlay, because the majority of these funds are for capital projects, these assigned funds. And while you're showing that you're no longer in a deficit, we don't have enough funds in the ending fund balance to cover these assigned funds. So any difference that you have will just accumulate into eventually be able to cover all of these funds and then hopefully have a reserve.
Mr. Mayor, if I may ask.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, if you could give me clarification, I kind of lost you there. So can the funds that are left over in our SPD account be put into this unassigned funds and be left there? And then that way it's a chunk of money that, depending on how our VPSO works out in the future, or if needs are needed elsewhere, we could tap into it instead of allocating all of the funds that are left over in the SPD account throughout our budget. So in short, did I hear you right or wrong, that the funds could go in this assigned funds account?
You could do it either way. You could make an assigned fund that was specific for SPD, like you have these other assigned fund accounts, and set some money in there. And then that would be what it would be designated for. Or you could just have those funds sitting in an unassigned fund, which is your ending fund balance that's not assigned to anything. That 76,000, even though in the audit it's assigned to capital overlay, technically, according to the budget, there's no specific account or anything. You could put it in any one of them and utilize it, down the road to stand up a department. So I don't know if that made more sense, but you can leave it as an unassigned and it's just sitting in the ending fund balance, and it can be used for anything, including restanding up the SPD department if you needed to. Or if you wanted more security, you could create an assigned fund and stick money in it. And it would be like these other funds sitting here with designated monies in them for a designated purpose, that you would still owe them out of the end of the general fund.
Okay, which the second part of what you were saying would be a restricted account.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, anyone else have any questions on this?
No questions, Mayor Campbell, but a couple of comments. And if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not as worried as I was a year ago about standing up the police position again. I think when it comes to these additional funds that are basically allocated, I just want to have a plan for them. What's our plan? You know, and where can it benefit us the most? That's the only thing that I'd like to see is, and there's several of these funds that have increased steadily over the last 3 or 4 years. And I'd just like to see us have a plan for what we're going to do. And certainly the city has a huge amount of deferred maintenance and there's a lot of needs. And so there's a lot of good things that we could do with this. But at the same time, we need to be really continue to be prudent to put money away and plan for the future, like been going on. But like I said, I'm not too worried. You spent about, what was it, 22,000 you said?
Mhm.
I'm thinking we ought to have at least 30,000 sitting there in case they have an additional expense. We have an expense with the pickup that we didn't plan on. I'm assuming the pickup's still ours, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so just in case they have a major component failure on that pickup, so we can keep them in a vehicle. But other than that, I kind of like what Campbell and Vivian both have had to say. So let's see where we can do with it. But the other funds there are a couple other funds that I was thinking that we should probably be talking about too. The remote sales tax fund keeps growing, you know.
Well, it goes into that unassigned fund
Right,
balance.
right. I get that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, okay, that's all I had.
Okay, thanks, John.
If I may, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with a lot of what you said, John. And I think for me, the only thing is, since the program, as it was brought up, is something that could change, we could lose the program. That's the one part of me that thinks that if we can take like this first year and go ahead and make that unassigned fund so that we just have that, 55,000, I feel like that's enough. I think Heidi kind of touched on it, that we could find places to make up the difference if we lost the funding for that program for a year and we needed to hire a VPS or a police chief. And then it would be looking into that next year on what we're going to do with those funds. And that's where my mind goes to, those deferred maintenance. And then also it's been weighing since last meeting on my mind I don't know if it would be a place for like our water and sewer, but I just keep looking at, that's a place that we were talking about, how do we deal with the rising costs? Our costs are only going to get more. And I've been just brainstorming on how can we, add funds into there that aren't coming out of the people that are having to pay those increases. And I don't know if that's a way that we would see that actually, I can't think of the word, but see that money actually make a difference and make a difference to where we could talk about the rates, how we were wanting to play with numbers, but we couldn't really do anything with it. So that's my thought.
Okay, thanks, Ashley.
If I could clarify, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead, Betty.
Council Member Keithley, were you saying you wanted it to just be in the unassigned funds at the end, lumped together, or you wanted to have an assigned fund?
Sorry, that assigned. Sorry, I said unassigned, but yes, the words are bouncing in my brain right now.
So then to do an assigned fund, you would just effectively create one specifically for SPD then?
Right, so it would be similar to the Susan Lake fund or the vehicle replacement fund, and we would actually create a bank account in our AMLIP and transfer whatever fund amount, if it was 55,000, or whatever you guys settle on, and then under the general fund, just as you saw on that previous slide or upcoming slide, let me get to it. it would, this hasn't been in our budget before, but I'm recommending we put this in moving forward. That we show for the general fund what those assigned funds are. And it would be just create another line in here, and it would be, you know, something of like assigned funds. Seldovia Police Department, or if you guys had a different title that you liked, but and then it would create an actual fund for it, and that would set as long as council wanted it to. And another budget, you could change it, move it around, or an ordinance that appropriated funds. You can move almost all of these. The 2% sales tax was dedicated by the voters. So it's more of a committed fund. You can still move it as long as you stick within Public Works. But really, council has the authority. Oh, and then Seldovia Permanent Fund, of course, is a committed fund. But within that, within the rest of the funds, council has the authority to move these at any given time if they so deem.
Hey Heidi, real quick. So just because I can't stand government accounting, number one, all the money in, money out. It's mind boggling so if you look at FY 2024, you've got the estimating fund, the estimated ending fund balance of 77,083. And if you, so that's real money somewhere, correct?
Yes, so that would be real money.
Okay, it's all real money, but it's just, I'm trying to just keep it in the layman's terms here. And then if you go down to the assigned funds total, so you take all these funds above the one, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those funds, you add them up and it comes to 424,000. So that's the assigned. So those dollars, where is that? That's a fund balance, or are those real dollars somewhere?
No, those are things that you guys have said that you will spend, that these monies are dedicated and these amounts to these accounts, these funds, out of that ending fund balance, which is why you have a difference of $347,065.
Okay, well, that's what I'm trying to find out. If you take the 424, you subtract the 77, you have the 347. So then this goes back to, if the 424 is dedicated real dollars, what the 77 up above on the estimated ending fund balance, I'm not understanding why that's deducted off there. Explain that math to me.
So the 77 is what you have to go towards that 424. If you had a healthy account, you would be able to cover the 424 and potentially a 2-month reserve of 2 months of revenue over like a 3-year average. So you would have added as an ending fund balance, you would see like 600,000, 700,000. That would be a healthy account because you would be able to cover your assigned funds and then also have a reserve. Right now, if you had to dip into your major maintenance and repair assigned funds, which we have sitting in an AMLIP account, we've had it for years, we don't actually have that according to our audit and our budget.
Right. So that's why the difference shows negative numbers down there.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you add another assigned fund, yes, you are committing more funds out of this estimated ending fund balance. And technically, if you did 55,000 in FY25 for police, you would have that because we're estimating 130,000. And I don't want you guys to take my word for this because things can change, but after seeing the FY23 audit and as we track the FY24, especially if you don't spend that 55,000, we haven't spent it, we're not looking to spend it in FY24, that should be an additional increase for FY25. This 77,000 includes that you have spent it.
Right.
If you don't spend it, it'll increase it.
Right. So that would then change that to the positive are our estimated ending fund balance.
For FY 24 and then also carry into FY 25.
Correct. Okay.
So if you, I mean, it's 6 in one, half and a dozen in the other. It's really just setting you, these assigned funds are setting you guys up to be able to take care of those infrastructure needs, those deferred maintenance needs that Councilmember Kennedy touched on and Councilmember Keithley. If you put 55,000, even if you put like 20,000 in an assigned fund for SPD, and then next year put another 20,000, and you can do it however you want to show that this, you're just simply stating this money is designated to this purpose. It's a little bit of a cart before the horse because you don't actually have it. But with current trends, eventually, as long as that's not a pattern that continues on, you should be able to make that difference. You would see a much higher difference in FY 23 if it wasn't for the grader and the way that was put in and out as an asset. But I am estimating that FY 24, like I said, don't hold it to me, you will see a greater balance in the ending fund balance than 77,000, especially if you don't spend that 55.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay. That's definitely a lot more clear. All right. Any other questions, comments, follow up on after that exchange? Okay, so then do we need a decision now then on what we want to do? Going back to the SPD.
I mean, we can revisit it again at another meeting if you want, but we are going to start running short on meetings. So I don't know. It depends on how you guys are feeling at this point. If you want to have more discussion, more information, have some time to think about it, we can bring it back. Or if you guys kind of have an idea of what you want to do now, we can start moving forward and planning that direction. And then of course you can change it at any point.
Well, then I guess that goes back to, so right now, if you've got, so what happens right now if so there's going to be some impact out of this. If you've got 22,412 budgeted for FY 25, then where everything else is it just, is the remainder of that just back in the general fund minus whatever else gets spent here through small budget adjustments throughout the rest of the budget?
Yes, correct. Here, let me pull up the actual draft I'm working off of because that might help. And it's just not finalized, so I didn't want to publish it yet. But if we go and look at our general fund revenues, let me see if I can make this bigger. So hold on, let me work on my view here because it's so you can see it all together. So if you look at the general fund revenue, what we're saying is, as I showed in one of those first slides, this is the proposed revenues with that 2% decrease. And then, we've got our rents, our property tax, our rents, our administration fees, community assistance program. We have our miscellaneous, our interest for AMLIP, all of that sits there. And this is our revenues, which we're projecting at $878,261.
Yeah.
Then if we go down to our expenditures by fund, you'll see the SPD in yellow there has 22,412 for FY 25, and whereas FY 24 it had 101,000. So if we're not actualizing that entirety of the cost, this budgeted expenditures will decrease, right? Which is at 845. And then it goes into the ending fund balance. And then if you carry on down through, you'll have this estimated ending fund balance that'll increase. And then when we go into the next year, we'll utilize that plus the net balance of the FY25 budget, which is currently $54,911. And then, that will continue to build.
Okay.
Does that answer it a
Yep,
little better?
Yep. Nope, that's perfect.
To see it fully. And then you'll see we have the assigned funds below that we'll start making note of, just so we can better track what has been dedicated or reserved for a specific purpose.
Okay.
So if that 55 goes into the estimated ending fund balance, or by then it would be the audited fund. And then if you put it into an assigned, it would continue to carry through. It just would have an assigned purpose.
So then is it premature? Obviously that's not, FY24 is not audited, but generally it looks like we're not going to spend that, then when would be the correct time? I mean, the money's still going to be there. When would be the correct time to set that up? Now, would it be, if we wanted that in an allocated fund, would it right now be the correct time to do that? Or when would be that time?
Yeah, you could do it through the audit process, or not the audit process, sorry, the budget process, or like you did for Susan Lake, or the vehicle replacement fund, we could do a separate ordinance later down the line in the future if you wanted to. Sometimes it makes sense to roll it into the budget because you're giving permission for, the entirety of the expenditures for the city, and that would be, you're just saying you're assigning funds, but you're not actually giving. That's the beauty of it. Also, I should point out right now where it sits in this SPD fund, you've essentially given administration, you've given me permission to spend it. It doesn't really say what it's spent on because it says other. And I actually have in the ordinances in the Seldovia Municipal Code, the power to move funds around within the department. So if that truck broke down tomorrow and I needed to go and buy a $50,000 truck, I technically would have permission to move it around and buy it. If you take it out of there and you put it into an assigned fund, then any expenses that come out of it have to first go back to council and have approval before they're appropriated out.
Okay, so then that would be, that would just be a little more, an additional discussion. I mean, in the end result could be the same, but it would be an additional discussion. And certainly another checks and balance.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Yeah, from my standpoint, that's not, again, not wanting to micromanage, but at the same time, in this day and age with, crazy things happen, it's probably not a bad idea to have that set aside. And if that's what I was hearing, both Ashley and Vivian and John talking about, that's probably not a bad idea to get that, something like that set up. And then, picking whatever amount we pick, to start that, I'm open on that one.
Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I think, for me, it's not an issue of whether I trust Heidi or not at all. It's just whether we have a plan for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
of
I think of a couple of things that are coming up that kind of scare me and maybe Heidi can enlighten me a little bit more, but we have some roof issues down there at the Flube and the offices they're all working in. And then I think about that pumping station too, and where we're going to be. And that, for me, that's what the thing is about. It's 50 grand. Let's just set it over here till we know how that stuff plays out. And that's just my weird way of looking at things, but I've been pretty good at it most of my life. And I just plan to fail or fail to plan to fail, It's kind of the way I look at it. So I don't know. I definitely see the benefit though of the the audited ending fund balance increasing, I see the benefit for all of us for that too, so. Yeah, it would ultimately show up there anyway, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Even
you'd
if we
see it
put
in
it
both
somewhere.
places.
Okay, so,
Yeah, if you're not spending it, you're just gonna see the increase.
right.
Mr. Mayor, it looks like Councilmember Payton has her hand
Yep,
up on
yeah, I
Zoom.
just saw that. Go ahead, Harmony.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of allocating the money for a future, allocating the money in that way. I appreciate, what Councilmember Keithley had to say. I think it behooves us to have our monies earmarked as often as we can. I think it adds a lot of confidence for the public to know that, we don't just have money floating around. We know what we're doing with it, and it gives us that little cushion. And then as you guys have had your back and forth, and as John has pointed out, if in future we still like the program that we have and we're still in a good place with the VPS program and we need to reallocate that money elsewhere, as Jeremiah stated, I don't think anybody here has any qualms or distrust in our staff, but it's just, I think it's good for public process, and it's good for our constituency and for our being accountable ourselves to have that money allocated somewhere specific. And so it's not just free floating. I think that's a really good and easy way to be conscious and mindful of public funds. So I think I don't need to beat the horse dead. You guys have already stated more than enough pros and cons in that situation, but I agree that earmarking it in that way is a good idea.
Perfect. Well said. Thank you. Okay, so Heidi, then it looks like you're hearing from everyone on the council, then we probably want to go ahead and set up an assigned fund for SPD. And then does it make sense to call it 50,000 or 55,000? What number makes sense to go there?
Eric Campbell, I'm good with 50.
That would leave the 30 you talked about, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay,
Just having that little
There's
buffer.
always
50 and then putting an extra 10 in for the truck. Okay. Yeah.
I guess it'll play out to see, whether they get their money again this year like they always do, but I gotta tell you, I was not for that at all, and Heidi, but I really like what's happened with the VPSO. I'm really, really happy with it. So I just think we need to keep them here, whatever it takes.
It does look like the state just passed their operating budget over to the House, and it does look like the VPSO program was fully funded plus enough for 8 additional VPSO positions.
Wow.
And that was in the governor's original budget. So I can't say for sure, but I don't imagine that that's going to change much.
It's unlikely he would veto any of that.
I'm never sure, but we can follow up and get a better answer.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'm also in favor of the 50,000. So it looks like we have the 21, and then we're thinking about putting another 10 in there, making it 30-ish to run the VPS program and the allowances that we've got. So I'm comfortable moving the 50 into that fund account.
Okay, sounds good, Vivian. Heidi, you're good with all that?
Yeah, that sounds great. We can move forward. And we will incorporate that into the budget, and then upon its approval or passage, we'll actually physically move the funds so that they're set aside.
Okay, good. Yeah, I appreciate the discussion from everyone on that. And yeah, took a little while to get there, but I think we got there and have a lot better understanding now. So.
Okay. So if there isn't anything else, I just skip ahead on public safety. We'll move through the rest of the departments for the general fund. The next one's being Public Works. And I did want to note that Public Works is always, Sorry, my screen is being weird on me here. Public Works can be difficult to actualize or project employee wages because a lot of it depends on hours and time and snow for the Public Works crew. That's the majority of the wages or that's the majority of expense under Public Works is wages. However, we do have that large grader payment and huge utility expense and a lot of other, while wages are a significant portion of it, there are a lot of other really heavy accounts under Public Works. It's our biggest fund under the general fund, or it's the biggest department under the general fund. So with that, wages and benefits only received a slight increase, and we utilized the 1.7 CPI increase, as well as looked at current budget trends and past actuals to make that determination. Travel and training is included, and this is a new thing that we haven't included in the past. But I did put 1,000 in there for travel and 6,000 in there for training, with a thought that if we wanted to, I was hoping we could get some heavy equipment operator training. That one's a little bit harder because it's a longer program. But there are some CDL certification programs available, and some other smaller heavy equipment programs available, that if that's something that we wanted to offer new hires in the future or staff as a opportunity for coming on with the city. I put that in there just to start that conversation, and would love to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Operating and office supplies remain the same. Contracts and services was decreased by 9,000. We put 10,000 in there last year for the boardwalk. That actually didn't end up happening. So I decreased it back down unless you guys want to try again for it. It just didn't seem like that was something that was able to be completed by individuals in the community. However, we have had some volunteers that have been doing it on their own time at this point. Our Public Works staff, and speaking with them, they are prepared to continue doing it. In fact, I think there's a preference that if we could utilize that money to rent a piece of smaller equipment or eventually purchase a piece of smaller equipment, that would be more beneficial. So didn't include that in there for FY25. Vehicles are another big expense. They're included under repairs and maintenance. All of the vehicles, and there's 9 or 10, I can pull them up if you want to see what they are exactly, have a minimum of $1,000 budgeted for regular service and upkeep. I put tires in there, but really tires is an extra expense. But, windshield wipers, service, oil change, general things that we need to do to extend the life of the vehicle. We've been really lucky with the crew that we've had over the most recent couple of years, and the time and awareness that they put into the vehicles, and keeping them up to date. And I'm hoping that is something that we can continue on into future years. The loader has an additional 82,000 budget for chains and cutting edges. The loader and grader received 2 new cutting edges a year at $600 a piece, so $2,400 for both equipment. The Chevy flatbed includes new chains, and the new grader has an additional expense for high definition oil. That's something that we just realized that we need about 5 boxes of that high definition fluid every year, and it's a little more expensive than the regular stuff. So making sure that we're tracking all of those expenses for vehicles. And then no capital projects have been requested in the FY25 budget. However, that could be an additional appropriation request depending on the FY24 project process. Councilmember Kennedy mentioned the roof at the city building. I am meeting with the contractor Tim Dillon tomorrow. Hopefully that project will get underway. I'm not sure how that meeting will go, but I will get back to you guys. And then depending on that, we may have to reevaluate or switch gears. and look at the FY25 budget in order to meet those needs. And of course, the Seldovia fuel and lube roof remains heavy on our minds. We did put a submit for a CDS appropriation request for it, as well as for some siding and plumbing on this building and an insulation. So those are a ways out before we even hear anything. And then it's like a 2-year process before we receive it. I don't know if we have that kind of time on the roof, but that's definitely something that we should discuss a little bit further here towards the end of the meeting or in an upcoming meeting. But at this time, I didn't put any capital projects in there with the hope that we will complete the city roof building by June 30th. And then we can receive grant funding or some additional funding for the fuel and lube. Any questions on Public Works so far?
Questions, comments?
Yes.
Okay, so you're asking our opinion for the travel and the training.
Yes.
And I think I'm always for opportunity and training. And I know for us to be able to get the people with the training already can be tough. What I would ask with that is that we come up with a way, and it rang in my head when you said like offering it CDL, because I've known lots of people that will look for a job specifically that will pay for that training to get that training and then go on to what they actually wanted to do. And so making sure that we can offer that, because I think it's very valuable for the employee and for us, but having something in their hiring contract of a period of time they need to stay, otherwise having to repay the city back for that training, so that we don't run into that, because it can be really easy, because it can be like, oh, I could come and get all this, work in the winter, get a bunch of overtime, get my training, and then go off and, do something else in summer. And so just making sure that everybody benefits on that. And then when we're talking about the snow removal on the boardwalk, what would be the ideal piece of equipment that they would want to have for that?
I think that's what we were talking about previously, was having a little skid steer.
Okay.
And that's what, when they actually, Public Works had requested, after the contract didn't go through, then they said, well, hey, can we at least rent a piece of equipment from a local contractor? And that's what they wanted to rent, was a skid steer.
Is a tracked snow blower just too much work? Because the boardwalk's not very big, like not very long. It's too much. Okay.
Yeah, I think, we have 2 tracked snow blowers that are operating at the harbor right now, that are already requiring maintenance and upkeep and repair. And then hours, we have employees utilizing them for hours at a time just to clear the docks. So it's adding, it's something that's doable, but you have to consider, or I would recommend considering employee wages and time for snow blowing versus equipment usage. And we could do a spreadsheet and work that out if that made sense. But
I'm just curious, just because the cost is so much bigger, and it is, the boardwalk's not a very big place. And I know just from the amount of hand shoveling I did this year and the hours and how much that's going to be cut down by having a snow blower to do that. It was just, as far as when we're trying to look at where that money's going, or the cost of it, that if that's something that we can do now, and then work towards that, maybe to think.
We can look into it. I think the employee hours is going to probably be the hard kicker, but I think that's a great suggestion. We can do that.
Or even just other, like if there is like an in-between piece of equipment or way to do it, even though we have the ideal, my mind just goes to, again, the boardwalk's this smaller area, and it is something we need to take care of, but if there's a way.
Any other questions, comments for Public Works?
I do have one. So I know you have sorry about that, Mayor Campbell, maybe I got a question for Heidi. In your classifications, you have an operator 1 and 2, correct?
We actually have 4 classifications
Okay.
now. We have an operator in training, an operator 1, 2,
Okay.
and then a lead equipment operator.
So what's the difference between them? Just experience or maybe certificates as well?
Experience is what we're looking at, years and types of equipment. So we do have a new hire on. I was going to mention that in the city manager's report, that we're excited to announce that Amanda Miller has taken a position with the city
Oh, I
as an
heard that.
operator in training.
Okay,
And we currently have a lead equipment operator, but potentially in the future, we could be looking for a new operator and hopefully, getting a level 1 or a level 2.
yeah. And Mayor Campbell, you might be able to answer this. I'm not sure. But I know in my past experience, operator 1s were generally class B operators and operator 2s were class A operators. So there was a different designation in the part of the country I'm from for a driver's license.
Mhm.
Class B is much easier to obtain. I don't know if Alaska has that, I guess is my question, Jeremiah.
Yeah, class B is straight truck. You can drive an end dump and stuff.
Yeah.
Class A is all your combination, your
Right.
combination tractor trailer.
Right. So they do have a difference here. That's a federal
Yep.
thing. And okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was one of the differences in the pay scale. And anyway, I just was curious if that was the same here and if that was included in our.
It's not included in the position because a CDL is not a requirement since we're asking them to operate heavy equipment and not necessarily rigs but I think that should be a preference.
Yeah,
is
the
that
thing
they
for the
have a
CDL for me is they have that training and that time.
Mhm.
They know I know it's not required on a grader. I get that,
Mhm.
but it still gives them more tools in their toolbox.
Right, which is why offering some training
Exactly.
and travel could really help.
Yeah, just to throw it out there. I had a class A for 25 years with a hazmat. And the organization I worked for would give us $300 a month for it.
Mhm.
Every month of the year. The 20 years I worked for them was a lot of money. So I was grateful to have that. So that's some type of incentive maybe to look at down the road.
Okay. Yeah, if there's no other objections or any comments on that, we'll keep moving. Heidi, that sounds good.
Okay, so those were the majority of the bigger departments in the general fund. We do have a few smaller departments, one being the multi-purpose building. And as stated before, we did shift some of the telephone and internet to council and admin and SPD, but the rest of it really remains very steady. We didn't include wages for FY23 and FY24 in the budget, but we have seen, we've actualized a very small amount, but still a small amount for repairs or maintenance as needed in the building. So just putting those wages and benefits into the budget. However, it doesn't, with the decrease of telephone and internet and really the minimal allocations to the fund, it doesn't, the fund is seeing a decrease in expense and not an increase. So that one's doing all right. SOC and I did put in here, this was in here for FY24 and I didn't change the title to FY25. Sorry about that. But on either page or on either header, but for FY24 under future considerations for the multi-purpose building, it did include to evaluate the overall account for multi-purpose building to see if it was working or if it was better to split that between the departments. Previously, multi-purpose building was actually library, a Seldovia space, and all of the other funds within the building and everything, all the utilities and phone was allocated out. It was combined into one fund as or one department as the multipurpose building for a variety of reasons, including ease of allocation and accounting and tracking through administration. And it's just something that's what, like when we had to do, when the VPSO program asked us for our expenses, when we have more expenses that go towards senior meals for our tracking for grants. So it's just something on the back of my mind every year as we go through this process is, does it make sense for it to be a lump department, or is it more efficient if it's broken out so we can see what each service costs? But right now it does sit in the multipurpose building, and then that switching out that telephone and internet just kind of slowly starts that process to help in the event that we need to track those figures a little bit better. SOC for the first time was included in the FY24 budget as a separate pass-through account. This will continue in FY25. However, as mentioned before, SOC is still considered under admin in the audit. And so in speaking with the finance officer this morning, we talked about, instead of having it be its own class, just to subclass it under the admin account. And then I'll have to look at how that would look in the actual budget. It may not change for FY25, but for FY26, we'll look and see if that needs a further shift, just so that it reads better and is more understandable, that while we're tracking it separately, and that's, I think the more that we can do that for these departments, the easier it is to really have a handle on what those expenses and revenues are, the better. But also in realizing that it is part of admin. So we'll look into what that looks like. For the most part, it received a increase to expenses. It received an increase to revenues, and we get a little bit, like a 3% for managing the employee payroll. So we see a little bit, we were not, and that was a big part of the reason why we changed this, is in the past, we were not actualizing fully what those expenses were, but now we are able to bill them for insurance. We bill them for workers' comp, we bill them for all of those expenses that we actualize. And so that we do see, like, it's like $1,500 that we get for managing that payroll. For the SOC, but it's better than being in a deficit for that account. So I do recommend that it carries on that way. And that was really long and drawn out. So if you have any questions, let me know. But hopefully that made sense. Cemetery, we budgeted FY24 a little bit of an expense. We didn't really see it. A lot of times it gets, if we really didn't see any of it. And for the other parks and things, we put them back in Public Works. Cemetery was its own because it had a grant, but the grant's been closed out. So I did not include it in the FY25 budget. However, if we need to bring it back in, or like I said, we need to bring in a parks up department in the future, we can. But as of now, it's not included. And then senior meals. I'm not expecting a full conversation this evening unless you guys have some really great ideas. But what I'm hoping to give you guys a heads up so that we can have a more in-depth conversation in the very near future. That we're slated to receive an additional $4,000 cut for FY25. That was a very enlightening part of our trip to Juneau, is that we did not have previous awareness that the senior meals funding is on a 3-year rotation. And so every 3 years, we submit an application that's competitive, and then we hopefully receive funding for that. That was what was the original conundrum, as we didn't submit in time. We had to wait. We received less than we were originally, or less than we had received previously, because we were a late submittal and they worked with us. And then now their pandemic funds, their ARPA funds, have dissipated. So now we're seeing an additional $4,000 cut. FY25 is their last of the 3 years. So every 3 years you submit on a competitive, and then after that, it's just like they re-up the funds. You reapply and it's non-competitive. So FY25 is our last non-competitive that we would have to make it through. And then for FY26, we can reapply and it'll be a competitive process. And then they take all of the programs in the region that have applied and they split up and divvy the money and allocate it out by that. So potentially FY26, there could be a change, a shift, depending on how many apply, how much funds are available. But I guess what I'm trying to point out is that for FY25, we don't have that opportunity. It just doesn't exist. We are losing $4,000. Finance Officer Yeager, I think, was saying that she anticipated we needed $10,000 to $15,000 to make up the difference. And before we were able to receive that through the Homer Foundation, we received some through the Healthy Equitable Community Program. And those opportunities just aren't there right now. We even reached out to Meals on Wheels. She's reached out to a few people trying to secure any kind of additional funding that she can. But I think that unless something outstanding happens, we're going to be looking at cutting the program to 2 days a week because we are just barely making it on 3 with what we have now. Have any thoughts on that one?
Well, I do. I don't have any specifics, but I know how important, I know the program here has really started to take off even more so with the amount between the amount of to-go meals and the amount of people that are served, in the building there. It would be with our, population, the amount of seniors we have and folks that rely on that program, it sure would be a shame to lose that. I'm not opposed to, if we've got to figure out some sort of subsidy, from the city or, or we come up with some sort of, donation drive or some way. There has to be some way to come up and, offset that $4,000 for 25 to hopefully keep the 3 days a week going. I don't know how we do that, right now, but we definitely got to start thinking along those lines, with some sort of partnership, to solve that problem.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think it's more like 14,000. So the 4,000 is the cut from the senior meals program, the state program, but we also had to make up the difference of 10,000 with the Healthy Equitable Community Grant.
Gotcha.
So which is why we're really in like a 10 to 15 to be safe side deficit at this point.
Okay. Yeah,
Mr. Mayor.
that's definitely, that's a lot of money. And I think it's probably going to have to come from, a multitude of different sources if we can figure it out.
Mr. Mayor, if I may comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Mayor. It's a great program and every community should have a senior meals program. I think this deserves more discussion down the line. And so I hope we bring it up with the rest of the council members, perhaps at either at another workshop or during a regular council meeting. Because it may take networking with people in the community for donations. But all right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. I agree. I think, it's going to need a little more dedicated discussion, and we'll need a lot more people from the public to help us and weigh in, and folks that have got some additional ideas on, perhaps some fundraising or some other options for funding.
I think one thing to just kind of rattle in our brains about it because when I think of senior meals, one of the important things that I think is not just the funding of having meals, but the quality of the meals. and having a program that really promotes that and maybe trying to be creative with that for the sustainability of it on what we can start to do. It'd start small, but I know I already talked to Heidi about subsistence fish and different things that we have here. It's the same thing when I was up at the school that I'm like, what are we? We're eating stuff that's not like we have the ability to source things here. And that's really more important for us anyways, because things like the airport being shut down, we can be cut off really easily. So it's in the grand scheme, if we have some of those things in place, it can benefit in a lot of ways if there was a natural disaster or anything. So starting little, but getting our wheels turning on how that program can help us like sustain more local food.
Yeah, that's a good thought, Ashley. Thank you.
Okay. If there isn't anything else on these other funds, we'll move on to the next part of the discussion. Which, general fund, assigned funds. We already kind of discussed this, but if you guys want to talk about it a little bit further, we can. I feel like that was a fairly decent conversation on it earlier. Does anybody have any additional questions or concerns about showing these assigned funds in the budget and then now incorporating a 50,000 for SPD for FY25? Okay, I did put this is important to note for future considerations, including capital projects and reserve or assigned fund accounts. And let's see, I think we just covered everything else. Okay. So with that, future considerations, community and business support. I wanted to include that this isn't just business, it's also for the community. And these are ideas that we've kind of been tracking and gathering and during discussions with council, staff, members of the public. I spoke with the finance director for Kenai Peninsula Borough, and she had some great ideas on just ways that we can continue to provide that support, community and business wise. Currently, the city of Seldovia supports permitting for several events in the city, including the 4th of July, Salmon Shuffle, New Year's Eve fireworks. We also provide a venue space for the Seldovia Arts Council Solstice Festival, a waterfront skating rink. We ensure the Seldovia Arts Council events. And so even though I said permitting for 4th of July, Salmon Shuffle, and New Year's, we also help with the Jackaloff Bay 10 miler. And provide insurance for any events that occur in the Susan B. English School by the Seldovia Arts Council. We also ensure the Seldovia recreational service areas off-campus events, which includes the waterfront skating rink, and we provide vending opportunities for businesses on public property. So there's just some of the things that we're already doing. The following suggestions range in size fiscally and in complexity and are not presented as recommendations, but merely for ideas for council that didn't read right for council to consider more fully in the future if desired. I'm sorry, this was like trying to get this buttoned up before we came down here. So just some of them, and this may not be all of them, but this is everything I had on my list. And if you guys have more things to add to it, we'll just keep adding to it. And then as we go through these budget processes, it may be that we're able to do some of them, this year or not, and then more next year. Who knows? I'm hoping this is just kind of a growing document of ideas that we can look forward to more fully vetting in the future. So one suggestion that was given is Soldotna provides $1,000 grant to improve building frontage. If there was a time in the future where there was additional funds above the assigned funds and reserve funds, I mean, you have potentially 27 business fronts and $1,000 a business if everybody wanted to do it. You're looking at $30,000, less than $30,000. It's not necessarily a bad thing to throw out there. Soldotna Chamber also promotes mob shopping and town bucks. So that might be more of a chamber thing, but I thought that was a great thing to write down of ways just to promote shopping in local businesses. We've talked about hiring a community economic development coordinator. We can offer more event sponsorship and promote and market local events. So that might be, a consideration if there's, I know we already do help sponsor quite a few events and organizations, but we've talked about in the past what it would look like to do more. New website with more community and business focus, provide support for local transportation deals, like a Wednesday senior deal, and then before that, even further, like a sponsor a discount day to Seldovia. Invest in the local chamber, offer water and sewer discounts has been mentioned. Tax incentives, I put a question mark by that. We would definitely need to further vet that. We can partner with other cities and chambers. I didn't include that, but we do have a partnership with Seldovia Village Tribe and the Homer City. And that's something that the council has put as a priority and that we continue to aspire to. But I'm sure we can do more partnering with other cities and chambers to promote local businesses and events. We also have an MOA with the Kenai Peninsula Borough for marketing. And we can establish, support, and operate more local events. Races were suggested, oyster festival, some kind of out-of-the-box ideas that bring traffic in, and offer and provide more marketing materials for the community and community events. That one is included kind of in the budget with that $500. So if there's a place where, we need to order, like I said, bags or stickers or pens and, City of Seldovia, come to Seldovia, we can, with the way the draft budget sits right now, we could do that up to $500 a year. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this, directions you'd like to see us move in the near future or ideas to put on the list. But this is just kind of a start of ways that we can continue to help our community.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. I'll just chime in real quick and won't go too crazy here, but I think generally a lot of this conversation has come up in the past, and we've been in Seldovia now just over 10 years, and came to Seldovia when we bought a business and started, and there was a lot of things at that time closed, and then we've seen businesses come and go. One thing I've learned in Seldovia is it is hard to do business there. We are, by and large, the majority of businesses are seasonal at best. We are all dependent on, good weather, airplanes deciding to come over and bring people. Weather's probably one of the biggest drivers, just in terms of people getting out and about and wanting to make the extra, take the extra effort to come across, leave Homer and actually come across to visit our side of the bay. So we notice we get a lot of cancellations when the weather is crappy. Generally discussions among the business community about, Seldovia not being, and you're probably gonna hear this in a lot of towns, not being super business friendly. What does that mean? It's hard to say what that means, but everyone just feels, when folks say that, if I say that, or if I'm in conversation, it's generally like you feel if you're a business owner, things are getting just piled on you, in terms of added fees, this and that. And it doesn't make it a lot of fun sometimes. I think a lot of people that stay in business, try to stay open, longer, later, feel a sense of, responsibility to the community. You try to do things to help your community. It's not necessarily sometimes about making money, and obviously we're all in it to make money, but at the end of the day, there's times when we lose a lot of money just to help keep our community thriving, because without businesses and without things to do, then our community starts to slowly die. So I don't think anybody's asking for a handout in the business. Most people know in the business world, you get what you put into it. So no one's looking for a handout, but maybe just not to always get stuck with all the extra fees and the higher rates on everything. Just because you're a business doesn't mean that you should be the one, footing the majority of the higher costs, I guess is what I'm saying. So couple things here. I know we've talked about it. I've had this conversation with a few folks in terms of our chambers kind of been, up and down. It's tough. Again, it's all volunteer. I am not opposed. Now, I don't know how we do it, but I'm not opposed for the city to either, partner with the chamber, take on the chamber, public-private partnership, but I'm not opposed to hiring an economic development coordinator, which basically would deal with just quite a few items on this list that you have in front of you. I know that would be huge for the community. So yeah, those are just some of my thoughts initially, but yeah, this could be, many more meetings with a lot of the stakeholders in a room, to get any future considerations going. So I'll just there's plenty of other business owners on council. So I'll just stop there and see if anyone else has any thoughts or ideas.
Eric Campbell.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I kind of struggled with this, and I think like so many other people, and I even since our last meeting, I've tried to wrap my head around what we could really do to help our business owners that would really have a profound effect. And one thing I think we could do, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but we could ensure that the billings that come out of the city office monthly to those businesses that are open year round, or are seasonal, whatever that may be, make sure that their billings are correct and not there's not some charge on there that shouldn't be on there just by overlooking it. We're all human, that kind of thing. The other thing I struggled with is, what kind of incentives could we create for businesses, And I think this paper here is a great start. You guys you're already doing what I'm about to say, is what are other communities doing? What are some of the clever ideas they're thinking about, or so what are they doing? I think for us, Jeremiah's absolutely right. The weather changes everything. If they come over on the Rainbow and the Discovery and they had 8-foot seas coming over here, they're laying on the benches because they're all seasick. They're not coming to the restaurant to eat. Just as an example, that's what happens. So there's a lot of things that are out of our control, but maybe some additional advertisement dollars for all of us as a whole. Advertising Seldovia. I know Ashley and a couple other community members were recently at the Sportsman's Show, and I'm hearing positive things about that. We just need to do more for each other that way. One of the things, even the senior meal thing, I think it's really important. Are we having a surplus auction this year?
We will. We didn't do so
Maybe.
hot last year, but
I
we'll
get
see.
it, but maybe we could come up with a couple $1,000 to go towards senior meals there. I don't know, just throwing ideas out there. The other thing is we need more events. We need more events that are spread out throughout the summer that'll benefit us all equally. So anyway, I'm just preaching here, but that's some of my thoughts. I wouldn't want to, I want to see the city recover and begin to meet some of our goals before we start slashing the bills per se. You know what I mean? We have too many responsibilities to accomplish yet with the direction the council's going with everything. The city's done a fabulous job the last couple of years coming along, and I hope we can continue that. But at the same time, I would love to be open year round. It's just not there. And it's too big a hit. So we just need more We need more revenue. When I still have to send staff home in August, we shouldn't be sending people home in August, and we did last year. So, anyway, that's some of the thoughts. Maybe, continue to reach out and network with folks and find other ideas and places to come up with. I know the borough has a huge tax incentive for seniors, but then there's several things we lose on property taxes every year here, so it just keeps getting to be a narrow and smaller window. Anyway, I'm done.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, Harmony, I see your hands up there.
Yeah, hi. Not unironically, as the only non-business owner on council, actually. Oh, Vivian doesn't own a business, but I like what Jeremiah, Mayor Campbell was saying about hiring an events coordinator. Our community does need more events, does need more money raising events, more like everything you guys have said is true. It's been true for many years. I just like to point out though that our volunteer pool is grossly overtaxed. I mean, those of us who have the time and the will and the ability to do so are spread so thin. I mean, I'm at a point where, with a continually growing family at this point, I'm having to decide what I need to offload. But the things that I volunteer for at this point in my life tend to be with, working with kids, or volunteering with the preschool, or volunteering here on council. And my heart is in the outdoors. I would much rather work on community beautification and digging up, planting the tulips and, maintaining those walking spaces. But our volunteers are spending time doing the things that make our community run. Jan, we have city employees who are working as our EMS, and you have our our fire department, and how many hats does Ashley wear? All of these things are really good ideas, and if we can be really intentional about allocating money or providing some sort of stipend, or whatever that looks like, in order to make it feasible to run these events productively and efficiently without just running our community into the ground, I think will be the key for maintaining quality events. There are a few events that the city or that the community has been, ongoing for years and years through, I'm sorry, guys, I've had COVID for like 10 days. I sound like a smoker over here. Breathing so hard, but there's things that we do really well. The music festival, our races, our 4th of July, that are really beloved events. You got Jenny's berry contest at the end of the season. Those are things that people love. It was sad not to see Tug Nuts come back last year, but things like that, like if we can be intentional about allocating money towards sprucing up the harbor in order to entice more of those events. And Stephanie's fly-in, we can't give things away for insurance on that that's not safe for us as a city. But whatever we can do to help business owners and community members bring these events to a reality is important. So I feel like I'm just being redundant here in saying what you guys have already said. But, again, as a person who's not a business owner, I do see the fees and things that are applied to the business owners, and it is egregious, and is part of why we are not successful business owners in the community. But as a volunteer who does help out on these events whenever and however I can, I'm telling you, our volunteer base is burnt out. So I like that thought, Jeremiah, on hiring somebody to professionally coordinate this, and maybe somebody who has a background in finding funding that could find the little pots of money here and there that would allow us to, I don't know, cover cost of insurance or cover the cost of putting up housing for people to come over for a weekend to help put events on or whatever. I don't know. This is a good discussion. That's my thoughts on that. I spin my tires on these thoughts all the time. Like, how do we support these programs without overtaxing the people who are already overtaxed?
Yeah, thanks, Harmony. No, appreciate that. Especially coming from, a non-business owner. That's good to hear your perspective. So, okay, let's see. We've got time for, if there's a couple more comments here. It's 5:52,
Can I-
just to be cognizant. Yeah, Ashley, go ahead. You bet.
Sorry.
I know you've been trying to get a word there. Sorry.
I kind of want to wrap what everybody else has said to going directly to the chamber and then also the economic development coordinator, because that was a conversation that I had come to Heidi with when the chamber had pretty much fizzled away this last year, and I was worried on what's going to happen. And the exciting news is that we have a very thriving chamber right now with some amazing people and awesome things happening. So out of this whole list, I really feel that figuring out that economic development coordinator position could be very vital right now while there's energy in the chamber to work with that person. And so that way, as you go through the ebbs and flows, there's always somebody there that's their job. Because the problem is, as Harmony said, we're all giving our time, and as business owners wanting to give our time to run these events, to do all these things. But then if we're not running our businesses, that's not doing the community good either. And that's my goal this summer, is because that's the high time, is making sure that my business is my priority without letting those events fall through the cracks. The Art Council, the Chamber have a high priority right now on trying to spread out events and making sure that we're not dueling events when we can help it, especially in the high season, and trying to have a goal that every weekend something is happening. The Chamber, one thing that we did is that we raised the pay for a 4th of July coordinator. We didn't have a coordinator last year, and we got multiple applications, and we ran interviews, and we had great success in that. And that's proof right there that these jobs, they're worth a pay, and you get what you pay for. And so I think that's the priority, is not sucking dry our volunteers in our community and our businesses, but trying to find the people that we can, like a coordinator, compensate to do those jobs. So if the city could work and partner in that way with trying to develop that position to work with our other entities, that's what I think is the first priority.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Appreciate that. Vivian.
Yeah, good points. I'm so glad to hear the chamber is thriving. That's wonderful. Every community needs a good, thriving chamber. And so I think knowing that is a great thing that we can move forward with. And having somebody who's a coordinator is a great opportunity for the community, the businesses, and for that person. So I think this is a great list that we have written down, future considerations, and it's warranted to have many discussions forward with all of the community and how people stand with it. But I appreciate the businesses, as do many people. But everybody needs help, and we all wear a ton of hats and have for years. But I'm very happy to hear that there is a thriving chamber again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. Appreciate that.
Can I add one more thing? I forgot. My one thing when I'm looking at this list is making sure that we're not doubling up on something that's already being done, because that's something I've seen a lot. And there's things on this list that, whether it's Chamber, Art Council, they're doing, such as like we're working on our website presence and that. And so trying not to have, we're a small community. If you have like 4 different places people are going for information, and that was a conversation we just had today with Jenny and Seldovia.com, and the chamber working with that to utilize the fact she has this resource, she's putting her energy into it. So let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's work together on that. And that came from a conversation on starting to have business highlights And that's something that we had seen like in Homer doing, so.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ashley. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, any final comments before we go to public? Okay, let's see. Do we have anyone from the public that would like to weigh in?
Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
This is Randy Sweet. I've got a few comments on the budget. One item that needs, I think, at least consideration is with the SOC and the recreational district is the school pool. We're having challenges with funding, with the education funding. The pool is in that, and I don't know what the cap is on the mill rate for the recreational district, but it seems like apparently there are some communities that have done that where they've pulled that into that type of a situation. And potentially, I don't know if it's possible for the pool to operate year round, but that could be actually something attractive. If people are coming over, that is something that could be done. It could be great for kids. It's just something. So it's just, I just put that out as something to think about. On senior meals, this kind of goes to your sustainability item. In schools, there's a farm to school and a fish to school program. I don't know if there's anything similar for that could be done for senior meals, but I think there's just kind of leveraging that would be wonderful. Even if we did our own fish to seniors, we could, where a request for donations could be done, or if other hunting was done, and that could be brought to senior meals. But to actually, whatever the requirements, I think there's probably allowable ways of doing that, but that would be something to consider. I guess one question I would have is in terms of financial donations, like for example, to the senior program, is there a way for the city to accept donations, and how would that be done, just so that people know? Because if people know when they want to, then that might be helpful. Let's see, on the business incentives and kind of going along with the economic development coordinator, I wonder if the Kenai Economic Development Corporation could fund that in whole or part. But, that kind of goes along with working together and leveraging. Maybe it could be a matching, but something where that could help with continuity. And then I think that also would be good to keep that, like bring that organization in, because they're there, but how to engage with them so that there's continuous engagement and help, so that we're actually getting the benefit of professional economic development work. And then whoever is here could have that type of mentorship, or, there may be somebody in our community who has the economic development experience. You just never know, but just to make sure that that's kind of tied in. I'd say a couple of things. In terms of how we think about our community and sort of strategic economic development, this last year, there's been, I guess, the last few years, there's been a focus on the Jackaloff dock. We're doing great things with the harbor, but I think that sometimes it's like thinking about that big, hairy, audacious goal, like what else might we do as a community that seems big, but may have an economic impact in terms of revenue? Because a lot of the things we're talking about are small investments, and there's some return on investment that we get with that. But hopefully we'll be getting a big return on investment from all the things that are being done with the Jackaloff dock. There has been, an idea talked about with the boardwalk. So it's just, how are we thinking about what our community could do that is good for the culture of our town and also is attractive to our visitors, and so that it's kind of a win-win, but it's just kind of thinking from on the arc of things that we might do, you know, we can do that in different ways. And so what does that look like? And then kind of, I think one of the things you were talking about as far as not doubling up, kind of thinking in a shared services type of model, so that whatever things that we might consider doing in our community, whatever we can do together, that we actually have a strategy to do that, and that we're sort of leveraging each other's efforts. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Yeah, lots of good thoughts and comments there. Appreciate that. Liz, anyone else in the audience that wish to speak?
No, that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, sounds good. All right, Heidi, I see you've got a quick slide up on the board there.
Yeah, just a quick reminder about the upcoming discussions, and it sounds like if I'm hearing right from council that I should look into pursuing what models for hiring a community and economic development coordinator in the near future would look like. So I can add that to the list.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and obviously we don't want to weigh us down too much here until we get through the end of budget cycle, because I know we're starting to going to be running short on time here for work sessions and meetings to get this accomplished.
Fair enough, Mr. Mayor.
All right, any final, let's see, we're already long here. Any final comments from council before we adjourn?
Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead.
I just like to thank Randy for her input. We always really appreciate it when community members come and, give us their opinions. Thank you, Randy, for being here.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting for tonight, and then we'll take about a 5 minute, we'll try to make a quick break here, 5 minutes or so, and then everyone can stretch, do their thing, and then we'll come back for the regular council meeting here.
Mr. Mayor, do we need to log out and log back in?
No, we'll keep the same meeting link open.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thanks.
sounds good. Okay, thanks, everyone.
We're just diehards. We're just, how you doing? Good. Yeah.